Welcome. This is Solutions with Courtney Anderson, and I am Courtney Anderson, and this is episode 206. 206 of this show. Wow. I do hope you come by CourtneyAnderson.com. That is our central website, and that's where we have individual show pages, sometimes multiple show pages for all 206 episodes of this show. We also have content for our companion video or television show. It's all about solutions. We have articles, I blog, we have speaking content. We're adding upcoming webinars and seminars. We have our awesome show sponsors. So there's a lot happening at CourtneyAnderson.com, and I do, like I said, hope that you view it as a library, as a continued resource that you can come, take knowledge, share knowledge, and continue to see us as a partner, collaborating with you so that you are able to surpass your goals. Now, today in episode 206, we have a show that is part of the Financial Fierceness series. I love the Financial Fierceness series. I love all of our series, and obviously, otherwise we wouldn't have created those and continue to provide new content. One of the reasons I'm so enamored with our Financial Fierceness series is because so many of the issues that people really struggle with, that impede their ability to surpass their goals, and that also impede their ability to practice the joyful art of business. That's the idea where you monitor and you're aware of how you feel when you're doing your professional things, whether it's paid or volunteer. You want to ideally have more moments feeling joyful than not. And the root issues about financial discontentment permeate people's lives. And the data in many different areas is just, I would argue, pretty persuasive. I know certainly as in my history when I was running my law firm full time, my traditional law firm, not my virtual practice that I'm able to provide now, but I did general law, and I worked with a lot of people who had family law issues, divorce, child custody, things of this nature. And one of the leading causes of families, relationships, not surviving and thriving is financial discord, financial dishonesty, financial instability. One of the things that relates to people's inability to make the healthiest choices about their work, where they say, well, I may be miserable, I may hate my job, I may hate my life, I may dread every day being around the work, but I need money, and I'm so desperate, I'll just have to do whatever I can. So the idea of our financial health impacting other areas of our life is, I think, unarguably established. So when I say I'm excited because there's solutions that we can address that hopefully will do more than just identify specific issues, but then we'll kind of hopefully spill over with good effects throughout life. Just like negative financial situations impact people at work, impact people in their personal lives, impact people's health, impact people's romantic relationships and families. The opposite may also be possible or probable, where somebody's financially content, so making different choices in their work, making different choices in their family, making healthy choices for themselves, even things like nutrition and exercise. It's so difficult to have the breathing room to focus on different aspects of our lives when people are under the cloud of financial instability. So it's really important. The great thing about finance, though, is it's really easy. Because unlike a lot of things in life that we talk about when we do so many of our series, we do our Help Situation Spotlight series, we have things where people talk about somebody's bullying them, or when we talk about our Myth Warrior series, and we're talking about sometimes abstract ideas or philosophical ideas or things of that nature, it's so much more difficult. The thing about finance is it's math, and it's simple math. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. It's just math. Your goal is to keep money. So one of the things that we talk about in this series, and we've done other shows, people get so focused on, I got to make more money, got to make more money. And that's not the issue at all. The issue is you have to keep more money. And some people say, well, duh, that's why I said I have to make more. If I make more, I'll keep more. And no, not necessarily. And we have done programs about this. People, quote, make more. They do. They get an increase, a pay raise, or a different job, and they have a higher salary, and they're just as broke as they were before, if not more broke. So it's not about making more, it's about keeping more. And that's often driven by other issues where people, everything they make, they just spend it. So what we need to do is be very candid with ourselves. And this is one of those series where, again, people in our community, we are here for intellectual exercise, really. So it's, we don't agree. We're not here to sort of parrot each other's information and say, oh, that's great, that you're perfect. No, what we're here to do is exchange knowledge and to continually ask ourselves, is this decision working? What are my outcomes in my life? Let me reassess the decisions that I've made. What can I do potentially to get a different outcome? And that's a tough process. So our show today in episode 206 is never mention a number first when negotiating a salary. This is a very, very specific show. So we're talking about finance, and again, I've continued to mention in all of these series episodes, and in many of our other series also, that you have to be willing to challenge your own stereotypes, prejudice, and these beliefs you have. And one of those that I've attacked, and I'm going to continue to, is this idea that you just need more. No, you need to keep more. So when we look at this idea of salary, and this is a fascinating topic to me. One of the things that I'm so interested in when I work with people individually, when I do executive individual coaching, career strategy sessions with people, they don't really understand how this works. And by this, I mean human nature. All right, so there's an amazing amount of data and information about gender and how maybe other individual characteristics that are not related to a job, but how those may impact how people perceive someone when they are negotiating a salary. And so, for example, there's a lot of information and data and discussion of, are women in the U.S. Specifically, are they not receiving the same salary and compensation packages as a man with this comparable education experience and in the same job position because they do not negotiate as, I don't like the word well, so I was going to say as effectively as maybe a male. So that's one of the things that's certainly in popular culture and discussed often. My argument is that when we talk about money, we have to again remember human nature. People don't want to talk about money. So when we talk about money, part of the human nature we need to remember is no one wants to talk about money. And that the challenge is that we also simultaneously all really want to hear about money, but we don't want to talk about money. So, as I mentioned earlier, we've done so many shows in this series. We did one, we did a show, it was episode 123, and it's financial fierceness. Why am I always living paycheck to paycheck, even when I get salary increases? Where we talked more in depth, obviously, about that issue of it's not what you bring in, but it's what you hold on to. When we look at the issue of human nature, my argument is that there's so much emotional and psychological unmet need that is wrapped up into salaries that could be demystified, and it also could be dealt with, and I think in a healthier way, if we were more transparent. Now, there's some sectors of, and there's some parts of the world where there are less issues around salary because there's more transparency. So for specific examples, in public sector, which is government entity focused in the states, there is, in many instances, if not all, just a list where it tells you exactly what somebody with a certain job title and a certain amount of education and or experience, amount of years, it'll tell you a pay range of exactly what they'll earn. So you'll know, you could look it up. So you'll know if somebody has that job title and they have that many years of experience, they usually will make like charts where it'll tell you job title, how many years, or education, or whatever the other criteria are, and then it'll have a pay band, and it'll tell you what the lowest is and what the highest is. And that takes it takes it out of any type of, well, I wonder what's going on. And even more specific than that, in many instances, if not all, there is a public right to know what we're spending public funds on. So you can go specifically, now there's online databases where you can go look it up. And you can not just know what a specific job title, what that band range is, but you can look and say, oh, there's Fred. How much money does Fred make? Well, you can go to the database and look it up. There's Fred's name. There's the agency, the federal government entity where Fred works. There's Fred's salary. It tells you. Now, I said federal government because that's our national, but they're also the same mechanisms in most local governments, state and cities and counties and parishes, and municipalities. So it does diminish a lot of this angst people have when you look at the concept of keeping up with the Joneses, right? Keeping up with the Joneses. And I have to mention this as an aside. There was a movie, and I don't know if it went to movie theaters, but it was on the movie channels on television and on the internet, and it had Demi Moore, and it was about that whole idea of keeping up with the Joneses, the actress Demi Moore, and I really liked it because it was a neat premise. It was all about this idea about how driven people are to have what they think everybody else has, and what that will drive them to do, and how that can be manipulated. And it had David Duchovny, also the other actor, who I really enjoyed that. So as an aside, I had to just mention it. But the idea is that if you see what somebody has, then then all this sort of idea you're coveting, you have to have it. It's diminished. Now you know exactly what it is, right? And the psychology, and I love all the different things that I read, and when you go to the show pages, on this show page, for this page on CourtneyAnderson.com, or any of them, and you look on our blog and on Twitter, but that's what I do, right? I read things almost constantly because it's fun, but it's also interesting, and then I share that knowledge. I'll put a link and share that knowledge with all of you in the community, and you do the same with me. You share with me great information and ideas. But the thing about all of this is that when you just show people, and all that sort of mystery and the smoke and mirrors is gone, the research sort of tells us that if I feel that I'm doing better, quote unquote, or equal to what I consider to be my group, then usually I feel better about myself. If I feel like I'm doing, quote, worse, then I feel worse about myself. So it's not even how much money it is. It just matters that I feel like that's the group I see myself in, and I see their number, and that number is either, equal to, or my number is slightly, or maybe dramatically, quote, better, meaning higher usually, then I'm happy. It also, if it doesn't even matter, I could make, and this is me more in a private sector, but I could make, and there's a great article I had in my university classes and my graduate classes where, and I'll put that link on this show page, where a person was in the private sector and they were in finance, and it was, I don't remember the number, but let's say that they had made $800,000 that year, and then they found out that other people made more money. Then they were upset. Now most people would think, really? 800,000 US dollars or whatever. I don't remember the exact number, but it was a high number, right? It was a really, really high, unusual number. Remember, the average individual person in the US, according to the federal government, earns somewhere around $23,000, $24,000 a year. That's individual income. So if you're talking somebody averaged earning $24,000 a year and you're earning 800,000 or 2 million or whatever, you're so far away from anybody's average life that you would think that would it really matter, but it does. And sadly, that's what I was saying earlier, that our mental instability and or mental health is impacted by these financial issues. Now, the issue with the person who makes 7 figures a year, 8 figures a year, and is upset that somebody else made more, that would probably be something we talk about more in our satisfaction saturation series, which is our series where we discuss what happens after you surpass your goals. But in this show, when we're looking at the salary, what my point is that people don't understand human nature. People don't want to talk about salary, but they desperately want to hear about it. What my other issue was that there's some examples of ways to make this less stressful. Just tell people. And there's some really good articles out constantly about companies that are innovative in the private sector who do the same thing. Some places publish everybody's salary. Some do it internally, some do it publicly. And this in the same quest to try to diminish some of this stuff. What's this stuff? The stuff is these fallouts where no matter what it is that I make, I'm upset if I feel that someone else who I feel is my peer group is making quote more, and then I feel bad. And then also on the other side, no matter how low I make, maybe I make nowhere near the average of 23 or 24,000 US dollars a year. Maybe I make 12,000 US dollars a year. But I still may feel better about myself because I'm doing better than somebody else in my peer group. And I laugh and I don't laugh. Well, some people do, unfortunately. And I might laugh and say, well, look at you. You're only making, 8,000 US dollars a year. Look at me. Okay. The situation is that human nature means that when you go to talk salary about a job, so this is what we're talking about, a job salary. It could be an employee, more likely, because when you do contracting, when you're an independent contractor, there's not really usually the same mindset about the income from the work, because you are independent contractor / self-employed / small business owner, and yeah, you're in business, so you see yourself as a business person. So you see yourself as you would any other business person, as having negotiation parity with the other side, right? Like, this is a business deal. When you're an employee, often psychologically people will feel like, I quote, need this job. And I know people get mad at me and have said to me on many occasions over the last 15 years when I've given speeches, they'll say, well, that's not a psychological thing. That's real. I need that job. I can't pay my bills. And I'm saying, yeah, I'm not saying you don't need the money. I'm saying that the fact that you feel like that's the only way to get that money is not being rational. And then people will say, yeah, but that's the job interview I'm at that day. And I need money, like I'm already behind on my bills. I'm not disagreeing. What I'm saying is, though, when you put yourself in a mindset where you feel like you don't have any ability to do anything other than just take whatever's offered, then guess what happens? You take whatever's offered. And I'm not blaming the other side who exploited your vulnerability. What I'm saying to you is, don't do that. If you're already behind on your bills, you're already behind your bills. So if you don't get this one, it's not like it's going to change it. You're already in the hole. And what I'm saying is that when you go and you put yourself in a situation where you say yes to a salary, that does not help you financially. And I know people, what do you mean? Have any of you, our community members, ever known anyone, of course not yourself, who worked and had, quote, a good salary, a good income, and was broke? I know you do. I know you have. So if you're stressed financially, you're not making good choices. You don't make good choices when you're making choices about your personal life. That's why I said earlier that so many divorces and bad decisions are made because people are stressed about money. You're not making good decisions about your work because you feel panicked and you feel like you're desperate. Name somebody in a desperate situation who makes really good choices. Most people don't. Now, you could be in a situation where maybe other people would say you should have felt desperate, but you may have thought, I didn't feel desperate at all. I still felt that I had options. You need to go into a negotiation understanding it's a negotiation. The most important word in the whole topic title, which is never mention a number first when negotiating a salary. The most important word in there is negotiating. That's what I said, negotiation. If it's just a contract of adherence, which is a legal term, which basically means, look, I made you an offer, right? Here's the offer. The offer is, whatever. $30,000 annually, US dollars. Contract of adhesion is it's not really negotiated because you gave me that 30,000 and it was take it or leave it. And so there's a whole legal framework behind that, and then analyzing something like that. If it's a negotiation, I have to have the ability to negotiate. Now, most people, when they're in a situation where they feel, and I know that many people have said to me, and they are very assertive about this. They say, I'm not feeling this, that I'm desperate. I am desperate. My point is, you have to change that mindset, or you're never going to be able to make a good deal for yourself. You're going to keep getting bad deals. If you're already stressed in a bad situation, and then you go take a job that's going to eat up all of your time because it's a full-time job, and it's not going to get you anywhere financially, you're going to be in the same boat you're in, or even worse. Oh, because it's a further commute and it's farther away and the hours are worse, and then it's hard to get childcare and your costs go up and all this kind of, then you're just worse off than you were before. And instead of having the time to go out and be able to find a better option for yourself, you're not, because you're in this job. And then that's when people start saying to me, well, I can't leave, I'm broke. And I'm saying, the problem is you're working and you're broke. This isn't working for you. Forget surpassing your goals, you're not even meeting your goals. The most powerful position you have in any relationship is at the beginning. Because once people start to know each other in relationships, whether it's family, right, or friends, or romantic relationships, or jobs, then a whole bunch of other factors are going to come into play. Your best shot at having leverage is at the beginning. Nobody knows you, and you don't know them. You don't have any of the other psychological and emotional issues that become embedded and enmeshed into relationships as time goes by, right? So this is your shot at the best deal for you. You are negotiating for yourself. Now, of course, obviously, this topic would not apply if you're in a collective group that's negotiating for you. Collective groups that bargain, unions. You have those in the public sector. I just talked a whole bunch about the government. They have a lot of public sector organizations and agencies, and law enforcement, firefighters, and all types of agencies. They also have them in the private sector in different parts of the world. There's different amounts of union presence, but the point simply is, then you're not by yourself negotiating. And often what the union does collectively is similar to what I talked about earlier. They work out a deal. Like, here's the pay band, here's what you get for longevity and all this kind of stuff, so that it's just like I said earlier, you can go see the chart. Now, if you're on your own, which is what I made the assumption that you're on this show, right? You're negotiating your own salary, you're by yourself. Now, sometimes if you're a senior executive and or you have really unique skills, right? Really unique skills, creative talents, you're a world-renowned architect. When you have really unique skills, often you'll have an agent or a lawyer or someone who represents you, and they go negotiate money. I've been very fortunate, and I've talked about in a lot of other programs that in my speaking, where I give my keynote speeches and do corporate training, I've been represented by some of the most amazing, in my estimation, agents in the world for those events. So the agent talks and negotiates all of that, and negotiates the fees and the structure of the compensation. And then, so I'm not doing it myself like I would if I was going to go be hired to work as an employee somewhere. So obviously that wouldn't apply in this topic. What this topic is, it's a job offer, it's $30,000 US dollars a year. What do you do? And what I'm saying is that if you go into these types of things at a job and you feel like, oh, I just have to have this job, I'm so desperate, you're in trouble. It's sort of like, this may be a good analogy, I hope. If you've ever known anybody who is romantically single, so they're not in their romantic pair bond, and doesn't really like it, right? So we all know people who are single and they're delighted. I was thinking of a couple of years ago, I was socially talking to somebody, and a friend of theirs came to join in the dinner, and the person had recently been, and usually it's sad, right, divorced, but not always. So the person was ecstatically happy and was like, I'm single, I am divorced, and it was like, I'm getting ready to have my big, party, I'm so happy, life is awesome, woo, okay. So it's always dependent on the person, but there's some people who are single and unhappy. Now, most of us would think, well, that's not reasonable. If you're unhappy, then get it, go out and meet people and find the right type of thing that'll make your life feel more full. But if you're single and you feel desperate, Now just think about this, just like I asked earlier. If you ever know anybody who worked and was broke, and I know it wasn't you, but I made the argument that I think you do know, or you've heard of someone. Yep, it was someone who did do that. Have you ever known anybody who was single and was desperate? And what the outcome is when that's how they entered into potentially meeting somebody. Did they get good outcomes? Just think about it. And the answer is no, they did not. And the reason they didn't get good outcomes is because they were desperate. And whenever you see those situations, as I said, I still do as much. It's almost exclusively. Yeah, not totally. I do some, very little family law now, just because of my schedule and there's only so many hours a day. But I do a fair amount of volunteer work where I listen and I try to give some legal advice to people with family law issues. When you hear those situations where it just sounds like it's a horrible, quote, mismatch from the beginning, right? The mismatch is like, I'm talking to somebody, I remember years ago, it was my own client at my law firm. This was not that long ago. But the person, the female, had a great job, a wonderful career, owned her own home, very nice person, great. And then it was her husband, the male, he was never employed and lived kind of as a homeless person, just out under a bridge. And I'm thinking, well, how did this happen? I thought maybe something happened to him, maybe something in life traumatized him. And basically when I talked to her a little bit more, it turned out, no, he was like that when she met him. And then I thought the same thing you think. Well, how does that happen? Right? Like, she's got all these great qualities. I'm sure he has great qualities too, but he's just not able to help anybody else at that time, or to bond and be part of a family with anyone. He couldn't take care of his own, he had a multitude of challenges. And a lot of what happens when people get in those situations is because they were desperate. And I'll hear people say things like that. Oh, I'm just lonely. Just anyone will do. I'm just desperate. And then people get in those situations, and often you have really bad outcomes. Financially bad outcomes, emotionally bad outcomes. It's just not going to work because that relationship is not healthy and neither party can meet each other's needs. And it's the same thing with a job. Jobs are awesome when it's a meeting of the minds. When the employer feels like, wow, how did I get this lucky? This person is really, really sharp and interesting and, honest and such a great contributor. And then the person who's the employee thinks, wow, how did I get this lucky? This employer, is really honest and committed. And you see, it's just like any other healthy relationship. Now, they both have different responsibilities. They might have different strengths and talents, but they view each other with respect. And it works for both parties. Not every second of every moment is bliss, but it works. More often than not, it's a good thing. They view each other positively. When you look at negotiating a salary, this is the fundamental part of this relationship. If you do not take this seriously and do it effectively, the relationship is doomed. You're going to be that miserable person at that job that when everybody walks in and says, hey, how are you doing? And then you say, ugh, another day, another dollar. Ugh. And the deal is that you're not really upset about that job. But the problem is that job doesn't meet your needs. Like I said, the lady that I worked with who was a very nice person, and the person she was divorcing, I didn't meet him as much, so I don't know how, but he seemed, I'm sure was a nice person too. It's not that he and her were horrible people. It's just that they couldn't meet each other's needs and they had different expectations. You have to go into something and be honest up front. So if you know that salary will not make you get any better quality of life, you're not going to get ahead, you're going to be just as broke as you were before, then don't take it. Now, I know, again, people can get very strident and say, well, it's easy for you to say. No, it isn't easy for me to say. But I do know this. When you go and you enter into a relationship with someone where you don't have shared expectations or values and don't have shared respect, and then you spend all of your time in this, it precludes your ability to go out and find that relationship that would work for you. And both parties are responsible for this. When I talk and I work with executives and managers and hiring professionals in HR, I talk a lot about this. You cannot just hire somebody because you're like, oh, it's getting really busy. We need to hire people. And you just go hire whoever. And then you sit around and complain to me how horrible the team members are and they quit. And they don't do a good job. Well, yeah, because they didn't care to begin with. And you knew that when you hired them. You have to pass on those people. I understand that you need staff, but you should have planned ahead. Now you're situation where you say you're desperate, you're going to go hire whoever, and then you're going to sit around and yell at me that these people aren't doing their job and their horrible attitude and they treat the customer badly and blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, what did you think would happen? They don't want to be here, and you don't want them to be here, so what are you guys doing? It's a relationship, and both parties are liable and culpable for this going wrong. So when you talk about the money, it's not about the money. That's why I said earlier, all those examples. Somebody could make millions of dollars and claim that they're unhappy and underpaid. It's about the psychology of what it represents to them. The challenge is only you know your number. What do I mean? Like I said, you could go out and have $800,000 or $8 million or probably $8 billion and feel angry and unhappy because somebody else made more money. You could also make, $8 an hour and feel really great because maybe somebody else that you feel is a peer only makes $7. Nobody knows all of the parameters for your analysis but you. So if a number is 30,000 US dollars a year, there are many people, I would argue, the average person would jump at that and be ecstatically happy. Now I say the average because the data shows that the average individual income is somewhere around 24,000 US dollars a year. So if somebody was offered 30,000, that's more than average. So that would tell me that then there's a high likelihood that a majority of people would say that's good money because it's more than what average people make, right? There are other people who, if you offered them $30,000 a year, would start, I don't know, crying or screaming or having a emotional breakdown because they'd be insulted by that number. They would feel like that number is the most horrible number they've ever heard. That's going to be based on their life experience. So maybe that's somebody who came from a family of origin where the family of origin people made $300,000 a year. And so now they're out and they're hearing this $30,000 a year. They're going to view it differently. And what I'm saying is, just like in a real relationship and our real life, friendship or romantic relationship, nobody else is a mind reader. They don't know all your history. They don't know all of the way that you interact with the world and how you view things. Only you know that. The number itself is irrelevant. It's what it represents to you, and it's how you identify with it. Again, if you come from a situation where you view, $18,000 a year as awesome money, and somebody offers you 30, you're going to be ecstatic, potentially, depending on the work. And it works the other way. So when you look at negotiating a salary, you have to understand that your responsibility, and I'm going to underline responsibility, your responsibility, not the job. Your responsibility is to understand what your number is before you even get to a point where you're negotiating salary. So I mean, before you even click on a link on an internet website to put in a job application or drop by someplace and drop off your resume or, whatever way that you apply, you don't need to do that first thing before you get to the thing about the salary negotiation unless you are pretty confident. By pretty confident, I mean that you may think to yourself, my number that I would want for my salary negotiation would be anything over $32,000 a year. Fine, that's a number. You may say to yourself, okay, I'm not totally sold on a specific number. I would be comfortable with anything over $28,000 a year. So between $28,000 and $32,000. Or you could say between $280,000 and $320,000. The numbers that doesn't matter. But the point is you have to know what the number is because nobody else knows what your life experience is and nobody else knows what the number means to you. Only you do. So you have to know your number. You have to understand that again, the first rule with money, with the salary, is that nobody wants to talk about the salary. That's why when you look at these government agencies, which of course are paid by the public, it makes sense, right? Tell us what you're doing with our tax dollars. And when you look at these collective groups that bargain, and you have it in all types of things, you also have it in a lot of very specific types of jobs, like professional athletes often have unions, right? Because they're really unique skills. The reason the union gets together and negotiates all that stuff and makes a chart and everything and tells you how much money you get is to get away from any of this psychological or emotional issue. Now, it still exists, right? We're humans. So even if I can look on there and especially if you're a professional athlete or a professional entertainer in a lot of these fields, well, I can look on it's public on the internet. People put, media reports, how much money you signed a contract for. And part of that is to help then people have your perception, right? The fan might think, oh, that's my favorite athlete. I'm so happy. They're so awesome. I'll buy more of their, memorabilia and apparel. But the point is that it doesn't matter whether it's 30,000 or 300,000 or 30 million. The point is just that what it represents within your frame of reference. you have to understand that whoever says the number first is going to lose. He who gives number first loses. Now, I gave all those examples of the chart. I said you can go from a lot of government agencies and see how much money somebody makes. That also, though, takes away the power of the employer to be able to really maximize what they could have done without that transparency. In other words, if I wasn't in a situation where I was compelled, by law or custom, or contract, which is also law. But if I wasn't in a situation where either there was, collective bargaining or some sort of public interest, or I was led by some executive who thought this was a great idea with transparency, the benefit is that it's going to cut down on a lot of, anxiety, and it also, in some ways, makes people feel more respected because they feel like, okay, I'm getting treated the same as other people in the same job category with the same skills. Okay, so that's in a way a positive. The negative, though, is since they were forced to give their number first, they were forced to say this job pays, this pay range, it's somewhere between this number and this number, or this job, the league minimum for this collective bargaining agreement is whatever, $300,000. Once they're forced to give the number, then it hurts them immensely because all the power they could have had to negotiate a better deal for themselves, right, is gone. So they lost in some ways when they were forced to do that. Now, in other ways, they've gained in terms of stability, turnover, morale, and all this other. So this is a complicated scenario. But I could make a very strong argument, and I have, that publishing your number hurts you. And it's the same thing with you. Whenever you look on a job application, and this is going to be different somewhat depending on what part of the world you're in local law and custom. But in general, especially in the U.S., a lot of applications for low-level jobs, well, but even medium level jobs. By low level, I mean low wage, so not anything other than that. But low wage or medium wage. It will ask you, what was your salary at your last employer, right? Or what's your expected salary? The reason they're asking you that is because they know it's the same game, right? If they haven't told you the number right now, because it's not one of those things where it's published or you already know, then they're asking because they may have had a budget where their budget could have paid up to, I don't know, $70,000. But if you come and write on your paperwork that the number you worked for was 40,000, they have enough intelligence to realize, great, now I have leveraging power. I know they just worked for 40. If they took 42 or 45, they'd be happy. They're better off than they were before, right? And that also leaves more money then for the employer to use for other stuff. Maybe hiring other people, maybe giving bonuses to other, executives, maybe giving to charity. It doesn't matter. The point is that this is a negotiation. And nobody knows what's in somebody else's head. And the thing that really is somewhat frustrating to me when I do coaching and individual strategic career planning with people is when I talked about a while ago that there's a lot of coverage about maybe different groups, and I specifically mentioned women in the U.S. maybe not being able to negotiate as effectively, allegedly, as men. That's maybe why the salary or the pay equality issue continues to be a challenge, meaning that for the same job, the same experience, that statistically in many instances a male will earn more than a female. Okay. My point simply is that I don't, have, quote, the answer to all of that. But there does appear to be some credible data that shows that negotiation matters. My argument is that the other parts of how a gender or age or other types of things impact that are being, I think, studied and researched in ways that are just eye-opening. But I think the core issue is that nobody wants to talk about money, but yet everybody wants to hear about it is accurate. And that your ability to get, quote, a good deal goes away when you're forced to give a number first, because the number you give is probably going to be lower than what you could have gotten if you kept your mouth shut. Like I gave the example, if the employer knew they could spend up to $70,000, okay, and then the applicant comes in, the applicant to be an employee comes in and says, oh, I worked for $40,000. Well, now they know, you just told them that you'd work for that little bit less. So they're unless they were an anomaly, it would only be prudent decision making for them to say, oh, okay, well, then I'll offer you somewhere maybe close to that. Unless there's something unusual, like maybe you have very unique skills and there's a lot of, now if there's competition for you, if you have other job offers in hand, well, now it's different, right? But when you look at money and you look at negotiation, you have to think, one, even if you're an employee, your mindset has to change. You are not desperate. You cannot go on an analogy of a first date with just desperation. Like whoever shows up, you'll just be like, fine, that can be my romantic partner. That is not a healthy or good choice. You're not going to get good outcomes. And you have to respect yourself and understand that this isn't about this immediate situation, like you feel desperate, but it's about the rest of your life. And remember, if we get into a relationship with a full-time job or a romantic partner where that person now is eating up all of our time, now I'm not able to go out and meet the other employer or relationship partner who could be awesome for me, right? It's a negotiation. You know your number. You have to know your number before you go into the negotiation, and you want them to say something. So if you're in these situations, what I'll tell people when I do individual coaching, and they'll say, well, what do I say? Look, here's the deal. First of all, don't go into a job interview when you have no clue what the pay range is. You need to have asked that before you got in there. Just like I say to employers, the same thing. It doesn't benefit either party. And it's sort of like my dating analogy. If you're going to go on a date and your goal is as soon as possible to get legally married and adopt 9 children, then you need to go find people who have similar ideas. If you go on a first date with somebody and their idea is that they don't ever want to be legally married and they don't want to adopt any children ever, then I don't care how wonderful and nice everybody is, you're not going to be able to work together in a partnership because you have totally different goals and expectations. It's the same thing at a job. You should never get into the job without understanding what the pay range or pay band or something is. Now, the beauty of today in modern times, it used to be that it was so difficult to get this information, right? It's not a government agency. They don't have a union. Nothing's publicized. My goodness gracious. There's whole private sector firms whose entire business model is giving the public some idea of how much money somebody would make in that paid in that job description, or even at that job description at that company. So there's websites you can go to. Now, I'm not saying that those are all going to give you the most accurate data, but I'm telling you they're going to give you something. I knew somebody, this is a while, I don't know how many years, maybe I was like 8 or 9 years ago, and the person had run businesses and had all types of really interesting things in life, and I don't know, but liked to and was used to making several $100,000s a year in their own net. So they went and decided they wanted to change their life style and be an employee, but in their same area of expertise. So it actually kind of made, could have been a great idea. But what they didn't do was ever investigate. And honestly, you can go on any search engine and literally just put in salary, whatever that job title is. And it'll bring up some sites. It'll give you something. It may not be the most accurate, but it'll give you some ballpark. So what happened is the person ended up going into job interviews and, of course, did a fantastic job because, really has its expertise in the area, and got all excited about this would be really interesting, and they wouldn't have the same types of stresses they had, running their own business and blah, blah, blah. And at the end of it, they thought it was going to be something that was going to be, a couple $100,000 a year. And then the employer and the industry average was somewhere around like, $40,000 a year. So if you're thinking it's 200,000 and they're thinking it's 40, and their data is accurate, if that's what the average person in those jobs makes, then it never should have gotten that far. And it never would have gotten that far if the applicant had thought a little bit more about doing due diligence. We don't just go on a date with every single person who asks us. That person might be in a relationship with somebody else. That person might be, a convicted felon on the run from the law for some other horrible thing. We don't know anything about that. That person could be a safety threat. So we have to have some sort of screening or due diligence, or to check and see, like, is there any possibility of this being a healthy endeavor? It's the same thing with the job. So when you go into the job, you should have an idea. Maybe it was just a generic idea from the internet, from search engines, and looking to see what is the average in that industry. Most governments will keep data, just sort of give you, again, a broad range of what the average person in that job makes. How does the government know? Because they're the one that collect all the taxes. And on your taxes, you have some sort of job or business or whatever, and then you have a number. So they know. They have all that stuff. That's how they get the averages of how much the individual person makes and how much a household makes. So there's tons of resources, and as I've said in many other programs, data is your friend. You do not mention a number first. So when you're looking on an application, there's a form. You can either leave that blank if you're not comfortable with that, where they ask you your salary at the last job, or they ask you how much salary you're interested in. I would either say, again, either leave it blank, and if that's not appropriate, then just put down TBD or to be determined and leave it like that. Because if they're not going to tell you a number, you're not going to be the one to tell them a number. When you're close enough, like let's say the range in the job is somewhere between 35,000 and 50,000. There's like a $15,000 spread. Now you might think my number is the 50,000. That's the number I need. Okay, great. Their number is obviously going to be how low can they get the best quality person. That's what everyone's doing. And not because the wages and that money that they're going to pay is money that when it's allocated to that one unit, right, of that salary, then I can't spend anywhere else. So in business, you're negotiating. So if you know you want 50,000 and you know that the range is between 35,000 and 50,000, then your job is to get in there and sell them on why you're worth the extraordinary top of a pay band. You do not say, please, and I have to clarify because I've had this happen or I've witnessed this. You don't go into a job interview and say to somebody, "Oh, I'm aware that the job range is between 35,000 and 50,000. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about why I would be worth the 50,000. I'm a people person, blah blah blah." No. No. What did we say earlier? We know that one of the rules is about human nature in this area. People do not want to talk about salary. Even the employer, the hiring manager, the HR professional of the company, they don't want to talk about it. It's just sort of human nature. You do not mention numbers. Remember, he who mentions number first lose. And you never want someone to feel that you're going to be difficult to get along with. We did a show, right? Be easy to get along with or be broke. I meant that. What you do, though, is you go into a job interview and instead of doing what I just gave, a horrible example, you would do things like talk about your expertise, specific examples of when you've applied that type of knowledge in the past and had great outcomes. So you might say something like, "Oh, I'm so excited to be here today," and in response to your question about my expectations, one of the things that made me really proud in my last organization was we had the ability to reconstruct the entire process in the manufacturing area. And at the end of that, we were able to yield, an 8% increase in our net profit, and that was just amazing. And some of the things that really were great for me were working on teams from different parts of the organization. So I love collaborating with cross-functional teams, and I love being able to bring all of that information together and to synthesize a path forward to these tangible results. What I'm doing is I'm showing someone that my value is worth that. I don't say it because that's crass and it's tacky and it's useless. But you are that. And the only way you believe before you go in the interview that you really are awesome is that you know that you're not desperate. You deserve absolutely the right relationship and to be treated with respect and to be paid what you feel you're worth. The challenge is only you know what that is. You cannot blame another person or a company for not, quote, paying you what you're worth. You have to be the one to decide what that is and then go out and do everything that you can to have the skills, the communication, the personality so that you demonstrate your value. No one gets everything they want. And a great negotiation, at the end of it, both parties should feel slightly annoyed. So at the end of a great negotiation, one party should feel like, well, maybe I wanted 50,000, but I got 48,000, but I also got an extra couple of vacation days. And then the other party thinks, oh, I really didn't want to have to spend that much, but it was worth it. They have a great track record and it'll work. That's how it should ideally work. But the responsibility in negotiation means that you're responsible for yourself. You got to know your number. If you go in there and someone says, well, I see here on the form you just put to be determined in terms of salary. Well, explain that. And then you would explain it. And you would say, well, I know that what I did at my last organization in terms of my ability to modify the billing process so that we cut our outstanding payment accounts by a third was something that was fantastically challenging. And now that I'm here and we're moving forward in discussing some of the really phenomenally interesting things that are happening at your firm, I don't want to dwell too much on that organization beyond what I learned and what I was, the compensation that I had at the time, I felt was absolutely appropriate for what I was doing. Now, with the expertise and the skill set that I bring to this organization, I think that we should discuss things based on mutually appropriate parameters of what your organization feels. Is there a pay range that you'd like to share with me that you've allocated for this position? Now remember, don't ever ask salary itself. You want a range. So you ask, is there a pay range? Because remember, no one wants to talk about money. And I know you're thinking, well, that's their job. They're HR, the hiring manager. I know you think that, but they're humans. So nobody likes to talk about it. Because remember, the back of everybody's head is what they make. So you may be up against a problem where the person who you're asking about money and the pay raise, they may say, oh, yeah, the salary. Oh. If you ask them and you force them to say what the salary is and they make less than that, you're in trouble. Remember earlier we talked about, even if you make $800,000 a year, if somebody else makes, $900,000, you feel bad. So we don't want to put that position, but you can ask, and once you continue to show your value, and you could ask, it's a reasonable thing. Somebody's going to have to blink, right? So somebody's going to have to tell the pay range. They're the employer. They know what their pay range is. And asking, is there a pay range or salary band that you're considering for the position? And then that's up to them. And then they're going to have to either answer it or not. But you need to maneuver this to a point as well as you can, so that they give a number. The thing is this, when you give a number and it's a low number, you're never going to move up from there. So if you knew you wanted 50,000, but you went in and told them that your last job was 35,000, then guess what? They're looking at it like I'm negotiating up from 35,000, and that's going to be what they're going to tell you. So they'd say if you told them all that data, then they'd do what anybody would do in that situation. They'd use it for their information, for that information to their advantage, and they'd say, look, if you make, you were making 35,000. We're offering you 40. That's way more than you made at your last job. And it is. And the problem is they know that's true because you told them. Now, if you go in there and you talk about what you did at your last job and what you learned, and you say things like the salary you had at the time was appropriate, you felt for your expertise, and you've talked about what you learned in your tenure at that organization, and now you're ready to move on to this wonderful new opportunity, then you haven't given them that number. And so for all they know, you made 70,000 at that last job. But one of the things that's fatal that people do in these things, fatal to a good outcome, is they think in their head, and I don't know how this happens, but that's why we're saying it here bluntly. They'll think, well, I'll give a number, and then but that number won't matter. It's everything. Remember how earlier we talked about how someone could make $30,000 and feel like they've won the lottery? Or they can make $30,000 and be crying hysterically and feel like they've been treated like, quote, trash. It's not about the $30,000. It's about how the person sees himself. So if the person comes from a background and a life experience where their experience is a steady job of $30,000 compared to people who maybe worked hourly for $7 an hour and had no guarantee of salary and no benefits, they'd feel like they won the lottery. If someone came from a background where, again, everybody made $300,000 and they're now looking at a $30,000, even though it's the same number, in their mind, how they assign value to themselves, they're insulted and angry. My argument and my point in the program is that only you know how you assign value to the numbers, and nobody else knows your entire life experience and understands how you see the number. All I know when I see $30,000 is that's the number. How it's interpreted is different. And it's the same thing at the other end of the spectrum. And I said, you can get somebody who's professional at a very high level. Maybe they're a chief executive and they make millions of dollars a year. And most, quote, average people would say, well, are you serious? That's amazing. But that person could feel really hurt and cry or scream and yell because they know that they're paid less than everybody else in their field. So it really is a sign of disrespect. And they know it. It's not the number. It's what it represents. And only you know what it represents. So that's why you're doing everything you can to maneuver yourself to a situation where, first of all, go only and apply for jobs where you actually do see the pay range. It makes your life easier. Now, it also takes away your ability to negotiate on the high end, right? Because then people will say, pay, I don't care how extraordinary you are, you saw the pay range. That's the max. So it does limit you to a certain degree, which is why I said I can make arguments pro and con. But if you're going to go into a job as an employee, you need to know and have some idea of how much that type of job pays. If you're way off, like the example I said, if somebody thought it was hundreds of thousands a year and it's 40,000 a year, you're just it's so far apart. It's not even, it's you cannot reconcile that. But it shouldn't have happened because both parties should have done due diligence. I also blame an employer. Why would you bring somebody in for an interview without giving them any inkling of what that job would be, especially if there's somebody who had been transitioning from a different type of self-employment or maybe coming from a different part of the world, so they don't know what the industry average is. Although, again, we should research it. You don't mention a number. You talk about how your skills and your set and your ability. They ask you directly, "Hey, what did you make at your last job?" You'd say, I'm telling you what I learned at that last job, and I'm really excited to share with you some of the knowledge and expertise. What I was compensated when I started that last job 8 years ago, I felt was appropriate. I gained so much. I finished my other degree, my certification while I was in that process, and here I am today, and I'm ready to move forward. You need them to give you the salary range, so then you can see where you're moving. But you will never negotiate up from a low number anywhere that's going to get you to happiness. You've anchored when you say you made 30,000 at the last job, or 20,000, or 100,000, or 400,000, or 2 million. When you say that, then you've anchored yourself in the mind of the other party as being worth that. That's why you're not giving the number. Now, and like I said, a lot of these situations, it's publicly known. So if you come in somewhere and you say, "Oh, I retired from the military, and my rank in the United States Army was that I was a command sergeant major." Well, then an E9, then everybody knows what your salary was, because A, it's published, and B, that rank makes that much money. Remember at the beginning, I remember we said the most power and leverage you'll ever have is at the beginning of the relationship. That's because they don't know you. We said later, as they get to know you, then there's going to be all these other layers of perceptions and knowledge that's going to impact how they see you. But now, at the beginning, you have ability to negotiate. You have to define your value, which is why I kept saying you want to talk about all the extraordinary things you did and what you learned and how you applied it and the great outcomes that you were able to achieve at the former organization, and not talk number, because the moment you give a number, you're gonna anchor yourself to that number. They're going to define you that way. And when you come in and they don't know your number, because your number wasn't on the internet, right? And they don't have access to the private, tax information, then you have room to negotiate yourself to a new place. If you're in a situation where you feel like the income you've been making hasn't been enough for you to get to the financial independence that you desire, then you need to make dramatically more money, and you need to keep that money. But you have to define yourself differently. So if you see yourself in your head as, "Well, I did okay on 35,000, I take 37, then that's where you're going to be. Especially if you tell them that. If you see yourself as what you are, uniquely inquisitive, ambitious for more information and an adventure in life, it could have been that you made 30,000 at that last job, but you could make 300,000. You're capable of all types of amazing things, but you don't want to anchor yourself. And if other people view you and place a value on you, you want to show them your value, your talent, and your skills, and then negotiate in a way that is fair. Now, negotiate means negotiate. So if someone gives you a pay salary range and says, "Well, the pay band range is between, I don't know, 110,000 a year and 140, well, then you need to understand, how do you negotiate? And then again, what you do is keep talking about your skills. You keep talking about what you bring to the table. You'll talk about your plans. Are you in this for a short-term, relationship with them, or do you plan to retire from this place, in 3 decades? You need to say that. That kind of thing you do say. You say specifically what you have accomplished, what expertise you bring, what types of problems you would like to solve at their organization. You give specific examples of what you've done in terms of outstanding outcomes in the past. You'll talk about your intention. If you're there going to the long term, then it may be worth to pay you at a higher part of the pay band because you don't want to go anywhere else. Remember, it costs the employer money and stress to have to the cost of having to go replace you is not nominal for any worker. I don't care if you make minimum wage or much more. So they ideally want you to stay. That's why retention is such a big issue in management leadership programs. So you want to make sure that you enter into that relationship where you feel good at the beginning. If you come into a relationship and you feel like, "Well, the salary is beneath me, I hate it," but you think magically it'll morph into something different, then you're being dishonest. It's just like that lady I told you who found someone who was homeless and lived under a bridge, and she apparently did what a lot of people do. People tell themselves, "Well, they'll change." No, they could change, and they may change on their own, but they're not going to change by virtue of you marrying them or moving in with them or telling them that you care about them. That is, you got what you paid for. They are that thing right now. So you need to be comfortable with what they are right now, because they may stay just like that. You can't enter into a relationship based on what you imagine that they might do potentially in the future, because it doesn't exist. It could exist. I don't know what the future holds. But if you're unhappy with them right now, that's going to be recipe for disaster, because all you're going to do is be resentful, and usually pretty quickly you get angry. That's what you did today? Well, yeah, that's what I did yesterday before you found me. I was doing the same thing. Now it's a problem. Same thing at a job. Ah, this is my salary. Another day, another dollar. The reason they're mad about the money is because they were mad at the beginning. That's the problem. And what I'm saying is you're better off long term, not short term. I understand if you're broke and today's the last day and they're going to, cut off your utilities if you don't pay them and you don't have any money, then you feel a huge amount of pressure. But what I'm saying is you're already in trouble, and to go deeper in trouble by taking a job that doesn't pay you what you need and what you desire, it's not going to help you. And you also limit how much you can move. So if you go into a job and you take really low wage income, thinking, well, magically I'll show them how awesome I am, and then they'll move me up to, I'll move from 40,000 to 400,000. Does that happen to people? Yeah, it does. Is it incredibly rare? Yeah, it is. And the person that happens to is really ambitious. And they created a path, and they had a very extraordinarily assertive way to make that happen. So it's not where they sat passively and waited for someone to magically come with the magic money wand and then say, now here's your money. It's not how life happens. Remember, every time we're talking about money, the person who you're talking to is thinking about their own money. And they don't know your life, and they don't know your value, and they don't know how you see yourself. I remember having conversations with people early on. I mean, like when I was in my 20s, because I opened my law firm and I was doing well. And people would say, oh, I got job offers where people would try to offer me salaries that would be, like a half or a third of what I was paying myself in my own company. But they didn't know me. They don't know me. They just saw my age and thought, well, most people would be happy to get a starting salary like this. And they're right. The problem is that that's not me. I'm not most people, and neither are you. You're you. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be handling a variety of issues. I knew I love business and I love entrepreneurship. And so I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. And I pay myself what I think I'm worth. But you pay yourself what you think you're worth, whether you're an employee or a business owner or anything else. We all do the same thing. The hard part of this is one, you must admit to yourself what it is that you think you're worth. And I have to mention this here. You need to go and you need to write down, and I mean it really seriously, the write down thing, because without you seeing it doesn't seem like it's real. So you can write it down. If you're traditional, on a piece of paper, digital, it doesn't matter. And you need to tell yourself your number. So if your number is 40,000 or 20,000 or 400,000 or 40 million or whatever, 4 billion, I don't care, whatever it is. You got to tell yourself. Don't tell anybody else if you're not comfortable. Just tell yourself. Sometimes if you tell other people, even people who love you, they're thinking about themselves. So if you go to somebody and say, oh, my number, hey grandma, my number is 80,000, she might think in her mind, that's crazy. I've never heard anything so like that. That's horrible. That'll never happen to her. So she may say something that's cruel, but it's not because she's thinking about you. She's thinking about herself. Or she may be thinking, my goodness, that's all they want. I'm a multimillionaire and all they want is this little paltry 80,000. What have I done? I failed to give them ambition, whatever it is. So keep it to yourself. It's your secret. But you need to know that number before you even enter into this negotiation stuff. And you need to be diligent in understanding that it's intellectual chess, right? It's chess or poker or whatever kind of game you want where it matters immensely that you strategize and you read other people. And it's never about the number, because the number is just, it's just basic numbers. It's what the number means to somebody. And you could be at one employer and the number would be the highest they'd ever paid anybody in that organization, in that job. You could be another organization doing the exact same job and that would be the lowest. It's what it means. And you have to take the responsibility for your own life to do the due diligence, the investigation, and get the data, right? What is the average? What's the average salary? And you got to start to make decisions based on that. And you've got to be really honest about what your number is. If you think you're not worth more than 20,000 or 200,000 or 2 million or 2 billion, then you're not. That's just, again, humans. And remember, just because you were something in the past doesn't mean you are something today, right? Just because I was that thing doesn't mean I am that thing. So that's why it's so imperative that you not be shackled to some other metric of some past experience. Maybe in that last experience, you were able at that time to work for that salary and it was fine. But today's not that day. That's why that number, leave it alone. Don't tell it. Don't you never lie. And I guess I have to say this, although for our members, I don't think so. I mean, to me, it's obvious. You don't ever lie. Don't think, well, I'll just tell them I made $475,000 a week and then they'll give it to me. What, really? Come on. It's fraud, first of all. Putting on something, leaving something blank or putting on there to be determined, or NA, not applicable, is not a lie. Putting a fake number on there is fraud. And there's a whole area of information in cases where people are liable for the fraud they commit. People lie and say they have education or a degree they don't. People lie and say they had a job they did. All kind of evil stuff happens. And by evil, I mean unethical and illegal. So that's not at all in my mind what we're talking about. What I'm talking about is you're being savvy about understanding you need to anchor your value. You need to anchor it. So do not speak a number first. Let them get to a point where they're like, okay, we are letting all the candidates at this point know that the salary range for this job is such and such. And when they say that, have no reaction other than, oh, thank you, because you need to process. It may be that what they said is double what you expected and you were ecstatic and you were like, woohoo. It may be that what they said is half of what you expected and you are angry and you're like, oh, I wasted all this time. But don't respond in that moment if you're on the phone or in person, because you don't need them to read you. Remember, it's like chess or poker. You have a strategy that you thought of ahead of time. That's why you have your secret number and you know where you're going with your life. They don't know your strategy and they never should know it, which is why you have to practice your skills. Communication. Understand that information is everything. You need to be able to read them, but you don't want them to be able to read you. All right. So there's a lot that we talked about. This is a very complex and at the same time, I think I think relaxing area, because when you view it as a chess game, when you view it as a poker game, then you understand what you're dealing with. It's human nature. So everything that you do, whenever you start, when a number is mentioned, remember that they're thinking about themselves. That no one wants to talk about the number, but they're going to have to give you their numbers, because that'll help you understand where they are as an organization. Maybe they're having diminishing revenues. Maybe they're in an expansion time. Who knows? I mean, we don't know all their data or information. You are on your own path, and your path and their path may synergize, and it may be a win-win, and you may be super contented, and they may be a part of your life for the rest of your life as that organization as an employer. It may be that you are not at all compatible, and where you are and where you're going, what they're doing, is not at all going to happen. And you don't need to put yourself in a situation where you're shackled to a salary. Remember, every time you take that low salary, you put yourself at risk again for staying in that low salary. That's why you got to get away from this. So if you think, oh, I'm desperate, I'm broke, forget what Courtney says. She doesn't know what she's talking about. I'm taking this job right now because I'm desperate. You know, it's $10 an hour, but I got to pay my bills. And now guess what? Now you're in another job that's low wage, relatively speaking. In the U.S., the $7 range is the minimum wage range federally. So yeah. When you do this, every time you stay anchoring yourself and defining yourself by that, it's not helping you. So stop doing that. Now, maybe you have to pick up a part-time job or do contract work or something like to pick up extra money. I totally talk about that. We did a program on diversification. That's a great idea. But you go into that explaining and making it really clear. Oh, this is a part-time job. I'm doing this for, saving for, birthday gifts for someone, or if you want to, you don't have to say stuff like that, but just make it clear that this isn't, your lifetime commitment. This is just something you're doing for extra income or for extra, adventure and fun. Maybe you enjoy something. Nothing at all is anything but wonderful about being diversified and needing to pick up extra work. That's great. But going into these negotiations for salary, where people will peg a value on you that's less than what your value of yourself is, you're setting yourself up for pain, disappointment, resentment, anger, and none of it has to happen. Don't do it. Don't go there. Don't go there. They're going to mention a number. At some point, they're going to have to. Even if you can get this all the way to a job offer, which does happen sometimes. Nobody wants to give the number first, right? Then they'll give the job offer. When they give the job offer, they give the number. And it may be the number where you think, yes. But you want to put yourself in a situation where ideally when you get that pay range or pay band, that all of that would be okay. Obviously, you might have a higher preference for the higher end of the pay band, but you'll be okay with even the lower end of it. And when that happens, then when you go into work, you know what? You feel good because you feel like, yeah, that's a good job. This reflects who I am. The salary and the work reflects who I am. And you feel good. Then you're not that person at that business or at that office who's unhappy and miserable, right? But it's all in the foundation in the very beginning. This is the most powerful part you ever have. The negotiation is not that difficult. They're gonna give the first number finally. If that number is acceptable to you, remember, you don't say anything. If that number is horrible, you don't say anything. You say to them, "Oh, thank you," and then you follow up and say, "Well, um, how quickly you're looking at making a final decision, or when does the position start? Oh, it starts in 2 weeks, or we need to know something in the next 24 hours." And you'll say, "Well, thank you so much. This was really informative, and I will definitely follow up with you in the next 24 hours." And then go think about it. And when you go think about it, you need to be not focusing on what you don't have, but focusing on where you're going to have in the future, your value. And you have to redefine yourself. And if you got these things mentally or psychologically or emotionally where you feel like, oh, that's too much money, or I don't deserve success and all of this, then those are issues you need to really face. But you do need to embrace this wonderful opportunity that you have to share your gifts. And this great opportunity that you have to negotiate. And negotiation may be when you get back to them in 24 hours saying, "Oh, I've looked at all the different parts of the position that you've described, and I am really excited to tell you that yes, I accept the offer." Or you may get back to them and say, "I learned so much about your organization, and I was so impressed. And I've reflected on this, and I've looked at some of the parameters, and I've realized that this would not be the right opportunity for me at this time." Easy. So this is something, again, that should be relaxing because it's a good thing to understand your value. It's a great thing to understand your value. And it's a great thing to feel like you have some control. That's what negotiation, some leverage or some influence or some control over your life, because you do. They'll mention the number. They give you a range. If they give you a number and you say that number in your head, you're thinking it's close, but not exactly it. Then what you do is you don't say, "Oh, well, that's the number. Well, I need $5,000 more." No, remember, you never said anything specific like that. That's very tacky at a minimum. But what you might say is something like, "Oh, that's a great starting offer, and it's very reasonable." One of the things that I did in my last company was when I was able to shepherd the transition to the new software, and we recognized the $40 million in additional revenue that quarter, it really was a time for me to test myself and getting buy-in. So you don't mention the number. What you do is you go right to the same thing you always do, which is another example, very specific, applied, of your expertise, of your ability to problem solve, and what you can do for them. And what that is telling them is that that's a good starting point, and that means they need to sweeten the pot. If it gets to a point where they obviously, here's the thing, remember, the only reason they want to hire you is because they want you. That's because you're giving them the value. You're showing them how awesome and how much you contributor, how you'll make it better, right? So this is the more power than you'll ever have. Now, sometimes people really do want to hire you, but they'll bluntly at some point say to you, "This is the top of what our range is. I can't offer any more money. I mean, I've gone above what we had already." And now is it possible they're lying and there's some evil, horrible organization? Well, yes. I mean, that does happen. It's rare, but then that's just like you lying and being a horrible, fraudulent liar on your paperwork. So those things happen when they're discovered, hopefully very quickly. Then the people are fired or sued, and the bad things happen to them for doing illegal and unethical things. But assuming they're being honest, then they're telling you, "Look, you're great. This is it. I honestly, there's no more. We can't get any more." Then what you do then is talk a little bit more about the other things that would make you feel comfortable. Right? Because remember, that number is already close enough to what you wanted to begin with. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be moving forward and discussing it. So the other things might be maybe an opportunity to do different work assignments, maybe an opportunity to do deployments to different offices, maybe an opportunity to go back to school, maybe an opportunity, whatever it is, maybe personal leave, maybe a few more personal leave days, or an opportunity to do some different type of, on the job training. Whatever it is, give something extra. Remember, what you're doing is showing your value. And you want them to feel like, just like in that ideal, if you've ever known any people, and I'm sure you have, who are in one of those really great uh, romantic relationships. And usually these have been, they've been in these relationships for, decades usually. The respect, the core thing that's so great about those relationships is the respect that each person has for each other. It's the way they talk to each other. And there's such fantastic research on this. The way people talk to each other and the way they speak about each other. And it's not that they don't get on each other's nerves, not that they don't, have times and they think, oh, really? But it's the way they respect each other at the core basic level. This is so emotional for me. And it's the way that in some ways they admire each other. And they think at some level, how did I get that lucky? Not every second of every day, but in general. That's how it works in a great job. You're thinking, wow, this is really a good organization. It's working out for me. My salary is good. My job is interesting. I enjoy what I do. I feel respected. I'm feeling good. And then they're thinking, wow, that employee is really dedicated and they have good ideas and, everything, you both admire each other. Not every second of every day you're going to do things and make mistakes and they're going to do things that make you angry. But the core of it is respect and admiration. And that's what you're looking for. And yes, they exist. And yes, they're very possible, and if you're not in that, it will happen if that's what you want. But it will not happen if you get in an environment where you're miserable, feel disrespected and devalued, and you just stay there. That's like being in a bad romantic relationship. You stayed there, and by you doing that, then you prevented somebody else who would have been ideally suited for you to come into your life. So remember, it's all about your value. The number itself is irrelevant because it's what it represents. So depending on the setting, it could be $20 an hour and you're rich or $2 million and you're poor. So it's about what it's worth, but you know your history and how you view the number. You need to have your secret number and you need to write it down. You need to know understanding how this is. You're not doing them a favor by working there and they're not doing you a favor. This is a relationship. When they work and they're healthy and they are successful, both parties respect each other. So you need to know your number. You need to know your value. And every time they keep talking, they come back to you, ask you really direct numbers, you give them really direct examples of what you do and why you're worth what you're worth. You don't never say that, you never say your number, but you keep talking about what you've done, what you would do, ideas you have for their types of things that you do to make it better, to make it more profitable, make it more efficient. That's what you keep doing. You keep sweetening the pot. So overall, if you enter into this new situation after you negotiate your salary where you felt good about it, and that puts you on a path to be able to keep more money, which is the way that we move to financial independence or maintain financial independence, then you're that person that you wake up and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I wonder what's going to happen at work today. Pretty good. Because you feel like it matches how you see yourself. Ideally, that it exceeds that. And they feel like they've gotten somebody who really wants to be there. That's the win-win. If you go into a job and you don't like the number and you don't like the salary and you don't like the compensation, you will never like it because you're already mad. You already feel like they didn't respect you. So don't go there. All right. I really hope that you found some of this to be thought-provoking. This is, again, one of the most popular topics for my private career strategy and executive coaching, and we will be rolling out, as I said, webinars and more interactive programs, and so I'd love to hear your feedback if this is the type of topic that you would like us to do more programs and provide more services, or if you are interested in any services specifically for yourself. But I am thrilled that you came to the program and that you stayed here. And I do hope that, as always, you reach out to me at CourtneyAnderson.com and let me know what's on your mind. Thank you.